The evening air was thick with the scent of rosemary and garlic, wafting from the kitchen where my husband was busy preparing the final touches for our daughter's engagement dinner. The soft golden glow of the overhead lights cast a warm hue over the dining table, adorned with delicate white linens and flickering candles that danced with the slightest draft. My heart raced, not from the excitement of the occasion, but from the undercurrent of anxiety that had been building since the moment we received the invitation to celebrate her engagement. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was lurking beneath the surface, something that could unravel the joy of this gathering. As guests began to arrive, I plastered a smile on my face, greeting each one with a forced enthusiasm that felt alien to me. My daughter Sarah glided through the room, radiant and blissfully unaware of my turmoil. She looked so happy, her laughter ringing like music, but a shadow flickered in my mind, reminding me of the secrets I had kept hidden. Memories of past conversations echoed in my thoughts, whispers of doubts and betrayals that had haunted me for years. I had always prided myself on being the protector of our family, yet here I was, standing on the precipice of potential ruin. "Melissa, darling, can you help me with the drinks?" My husband called from the kitchen, breaking my reverie. I nodded, moving toward him, my hands trembling slightly as I reached for the wine bottles. "Everything looks perfect, love," I said, though my voice lacked conviction. I couldn't help but wonder if he sensed my unease, if he knew how precarious our family's happiness truly was. As I poured the wine, I caught a glimpse of Sarah chatting animatedly with her fiancé across the room. The sight was both heartwarming and heartbreaking. I wanted to believe that their love was pure, but a nagging doubt whispered that I had not been completely honest with her about our family's history. Just then, a casual remark from one of the guests pierced through the chatter, igniting a spark of tension that sent a jolt through me. "Did you hear about the Johnsons?" the guest said, laughter in her voice. I never would have guessed they had such a scandal in their past. The laughter faded into a hush, and I felt the weight of 1,000 eyes upon me, the unspoken truth hanging heavy in the air. In that moment, I realized that this dinner was not just a celebration, it was a reckoning. I had to confront the truths I had buried deep within me, or risk losing everything I held dear. The atmosphere was still charged with the remnants of the celebration, but the warmth of the vanilla scent had turned into something suffocating. I stood by the window, watching the last rays of sunlight bleed into the horizon, painting the sky in deep oranges and purples. Each color felt like a reflection of my own turmoil, a beautiful facade hiding the chaos inside. I could still hear the echoes of laughter, but now they felt distant, like a haunting reminder of the joy I couldn't quite grasp. My heart raced as I replayed the moments of the evening, the tension coiling tighter around me like a snake preparing to strike. As I leaned against the cool glass, I felt a bead of sweat trickle down my back, a physical manifestation of my anxiety. The weight of my mother's gift, the locket, hung heavily around my neck, a constant reminder of expectations and memories I was desperate to escape. I could almost hear her voice, sweet and encouraging, telling me to cherish the past. But all I felt was a growing urge to break free from the chains of familial loyalty that bound me. I closed my eyes, trying to drown out the cacophony of emotions swirling within me, but the memories of simpler times would not let me go. Suddenly, a sharp voice cut through my reverie. "Melissa, are you okay?" It was my younger brother, Noah, standing in the doorway, concern etched across his face. I forced a smile, but it felt brittle, ready to shatter at the slightest provocation. "Yeah, just thinking," he stepped closer, his brow furrowing. "About what, that joke earlier? You know Mom was just trying to make you happy, right?" The sincerity in his voice tugged at my heart, but I felt a surge of frustration. Did he not see how stifling it all was? I sighed, the sound escaping my lips like a deflated balloon. "It's more complicated than that, Noah, you wouldn't understand." He shifted uncomfortably, glancing away as if my words had struck a nerve. I could feel the weight of his disappointment, and it made my stomach churn. "I just want to make things right. We're family, Melissa. We should be there for each other, not tearing each other apart." His words hung in the air, heavy with meaning, and I felt a flicker of guilt. But what was the cost of loyalty? The thought gnawed at me, leaving a bitter taste in my mouth. The night had promised joy, yet here I was, trapped in a web of conflicting emotions, questioning everything I thought I knew about love and family. The tension in the air was palpable, each second stretching into an eternity as I sat across from Clara at the dining table. The flickering glow of the candles cast dancing shadows on the wall, illuminating the family portraits that hung like silent witnesses to our unraveling ties. I could hear the soft hum of conversation around me, punctuated by the sound of silverware clinking against plates, yet I felt like an outsider in my own home. The scent of roasted chicken lingered, enticing yet tainted by the unease that settled in my stomach like a rock. Clara's gaze was fixed on her plate, a faint tremor in her fingers as she pushed a piece of chicken around, as if the act of eating had lost its meaning. I wanted to reach out, to bridge the chasm that had opened between us, but my heart raced with the fear of saying the wrong thing. Memories of our laughter, our shared moments, flashed through my mind, each one a stark reminder of how far we had fallen. "Melissa, why don't you share your plans for the summer?" My father's voice rang with a forced cheerfulness, shattering the silence that had settled like a heavy fog. Clara's eyes darted to me, her expression a mix of hope and apprehension. I could see the tension in her shoulders, the way she held her breath as if bracing for the impact of my words. I hesitated, my mind racing. Should I tread lightly or speak my truth? The weight of expectation hung over me like a storm cloud, and I felt the pressure build in my chest. I took a deep breath, the air heavy with the aroma of the meal, and blurted out, "I've been thinking about taking some time away." The words slipped from my lips like a confession, and the room went silent. Clara's reaction was immediate. Her fork clattered against her plate, a sound that echoed like a gunshot in the stillness. I could see the shock wash over her face, morphing into hurt, and I felt a wave of regret crash over me. What had I done? Dinner resumed with an awkward tension, the silence wrapping around us like a suffocating blanket. I could barely taste the food, each bite a reminder of the growing distance between Clara and me. I caught her glance, and in that brief moment I saw a flicker of anger mixed with sadness. My heart raced, pounding in my chest like a drum, as I wondered if I had just driven a wedge further between us. "Why would you need to go away?" Clara finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper, the tremor betraying the calm facade she tried to maintain. I could see the sheen of unshed tears in her eyes, and it twisted my insides with guilt. I opened my mouth to respond, to explain the suffocating weight of our unspoken issues, but the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I opted for silence, fearing that anything I said would only deepen her pain. I could feel the heat rising in my cheeks, a flush of shame creeping in as I realized how deeply I had hurt her. The evening dragged on, the clock ticking ominously in the background, each tick a reminder of the unspoken words hanging in the air. I watched as Clara pushed her food away, her appetite vanished like a mirage. The laughter of my family around us felt distant, a cruel reminder of the joy that once filled our home. I wanted to reach across the table to mend what I had broken, but my hands felt heavy, weighed down by the gravity of the moment. As the dinner came to an end, Clara barely made eye contact with me. The fragile smile she wore felt like a mask, hiding the turmoil beneath. I could see the cracks in our relationship widening, and the realization hit me hard: I was losing her. My heart ached with the knowledge that mending our bond would be a battle, but I knew I had to try, even if it felt like climbing a mountain. I lingered at the table, my stomach twisted in knots, my mind racing with possibilities. How could I fix this? What could I say to ease her heart? The thought of her disappointment lingered like a shadow, and I knew that the path ahead would be fraught with challenges. Yet I was determined to find a way back to her, no matter how daunting it seemed. The dining room buzzed with anticipation, yet I could feel an undercurrent of tension swirling around us. The flickering candlelight cast elongated shadows on the walls, creating a dance of light and darkness that mirrored my inner turmoil. I glanced at the meticulously set table, the crisp white tablecloth contrasting sharply with the vibrant colors of the dishes Clara had prepared. It smelled of roasted chicken, garlic, and herbs, yet my stomach churned with anxiety, refusing to settle into the feast laid before us. As we settled into our places, I noticed Clara's hands tremble slightly as she poured the wine, her movements deliberate but strained. I wanted to reach over, to squeeze her hand and reassure her that everything would be okay, but the words felt trapped inside me. The clink of glasses broke the silence as my father initiated a toast, his voice bright yet betraying a hint of concern. "To family," he proclaimed, raising his glass high. I echoed his sentiment, but the clinking sound reverberated like a hollow note in my heart, emphasizing the distance that had grown between Clara and me. The conversation flowed around me, a wave of laughter and light-hearted banter, yet I felt like a ghost watching from the sidelines. Clara's laughter rang out, but it felt forced, a mask over the hurt simmering beneath. I stole glances at her, trying to gauge her feelings, but each time our eyes met, I felt an electric charge of unspoken words that hung heavily between us. I remembered the nights of laughter we had shared, the warmth of our bond, and now it felt like a fragile thread ready to snap. Then the conversation turned to me, and my father inquired about my future plans. I felt the weight of Clara's gaze, urging me to articulate my thoughts, yet the words felt stuck in my throat. Memories of the previous night flooded my mind, and I hesitated, my heart racing as I battled with the fear of further disappointing her. I wanted to bridge the gap, to offer my honest feelings, but the fear of her reaction held me captive. Finally, my mouth moved before my brain could catch up. I've been thinking about taking some time away," I blurted out, my voice barely above a whisper. The moment the words left my lips, I could see Clara's expression shift. Surprise and hurt clashed across her features. It was a misstep, another crack in the fragile facade we had been maintaining. The silence that followed felt monumental, a chasm opening wider between us. The clattering of utensils filled the tense void, and I could feel Clara's disappointment radiating across the table. I pushed my food around my plate, the flavors lost on me, as I wrestled with the reality of what I had just said. How could I have let my impulsiveness dictate my words? I wanted to reach out to mend the rift, but the fear of further hurting her loomed large. A silent plea echoed in my heart. How could I fix this? As the evening wore on, I could sense Clara retreating into herself, her laughter replaced by a brittle smile that barely touched her eyes. My chest tightened and a wave of guilt washed over me. I wanted to tell her how much I loved her, how deeply I regretted my thoughtless words, but the moment felt irretrievable. The thought of losing her, the anchor of my life, sent a chill through me, and I knew the road to reconnection would be fraught with challenges, yet I had to try. I couldn't let this moment define our relationship. I had to find a way back to her, even if it meant confronting the pain I had caused. The sun dipped low in the sky, casting long shadows across the kitchen as I stood there, the scent of garlic and herbs wafting through the air, mingling with the remnants of yesterday's tension. A muted hum of conversation filled the space, but my heart raced in the silence I felt with Clara. I glanced at her as she stirred the pot on the stove, her brow furrowed in concentration. The warmth of the kitchen should have felt comforting, but instead, it amplified the chasm between us. My stomach churned with anxiety, the knot tightening each time I thought of how to breach the topic that loomed over us like a storm cloud. "Mom, can we talk?" I finally managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper, trembling with vulnerability. Clara paused, her back to me, the clattering of utensils falling silent. The air grew thick with unspoken words, the tension palpable as I could almost hear our hearts beating in sync, both hesitant yet desperate for connection. I held my breath, waiting for her response, the seconds stretching like an eternity. Would she hear me? Would she even want to? She turned slowly, her eyes searching mine for sincerity. "What is it, Zoe?" she asked, her tone steady yet laced with an undercurrent of weariness. I felt the weight of her gaze pierce through me, and I knew I had to tread carefully. My heart pounded in my chest. This was my chance to mend the rift I had created. As I stepped closer, the cool tiles beneath my feet felt grounding, yet I could still sense the distance that hung like a fog between us. "I need to apologize for what I said during dinner. I was selfish, and I didn't think about how my words would affect you," I blurted out, each word tumbling out like a confession. Clara's expression shifted, a flicker of surprise crossing her face before it settled into something softer, yet guarded. I could see the hurt beneath her surface, a reflection of my own shame. The realization of her distress twisted like a knife in my gut, and I fought to keep my composure, determined to convey the depth of my regret. "It hurt, Zoe. You have to understand that I just want the best for you, and when you said you wanted to take time away, it felt like you were pushing me away again," she replied, her voice trembling slightly. I could see her hands clenching around the wooden spoon, the tension radiating off her as she struggled to maintain her composure. In that moment, my heart ached with the knowledge that my thoughtlessness had driven a wedge further between us, and I felt the tears prick at my eyes, a testament to the emotional turmoil we were both enduring. "I know I've made mistakes, but I want to do better. I want to be here and I want us to work through this together," I pleaded, reaching out to touch her arm gently, a small gesture of reconciliation. Clara looked down at my hand on her arm, and for a heartbeat, I thought I saw a flicker of hope in her eyes, a chance for us to bridge the gap. Yet the fear of her rejecting my attempt loomed large, a shadow that threatened to consume the fragile moment we were sharing. "I need time to process, Zoe. You can't just expect everything to go back to normal overnight," she said, her voice steady but laced with sorrow. I felt my heart sink, the reality of her words sinking in. I understood that healing would not come easy. It would take patience and effort from both of us. But as she looked at me, I could see a glimmer of understanding, a willingness to engage that hadn't been there before. Perhaps we could start anew, even if it meant taking small, tentative steps forward together, navigating this complicated landscape of family and love. The atmosphere in the living room was thick with unspoken tension, the air crackling with a sense of urgency that I could almost touch. Sunlight streamed through the large windows, illuminating the dust motes swirling in the air, but it did little to brighten the heaviness that hung over us. Clara sat stiffly on the couch, her fingers nervously twisting the hem of her sweater, a small gesture that betrayed her inner turmoil. I could smell the faint aroma of freshly brewed coffee, an attempt to ease the strain, but it only heightened my anxiety. Taking a deep breath, I stepped closer, my heart pounding in my chest like a drumbeat of doubt. "Mom, thank you for agreeing to this. I really think we need to talk," I said, my voice quivering slightly as the words began to tumble out. They felt weighted, laden with the gravity of my regrets and the hope that maybe, just maybe, we could find common ground again. As I spoke, I noticed the flicker of defiance in Clara's eyes, a mirror reflecting the hurt I had inflicted. "You think a meeting can fix everything, Zoe?" She shot back, her voice sharp, each word like a blade cutting through the silence. I felt my heart drop. It was clear that my previous actions still haunted her. "No, I don't expect it to be easy," I replied, desperation creeping into my tone as I searched her face, looking for any sign of willingness to engage. But I want to try, I want to make things right between us. The memories of our shared laughter and tears flooded back, reminding me of what was at stake. Our connection was worth fighting for. As we began to share our feelings, I felt a small shift in the atmosphere. Clara's expression softened when I recounted the moments she had been my rock. "Remember when you helped me with that project?" I asked, my voice tinged with nostalgia. She nodded, a faint smile breaking through her defenses, and for a brief moment, the distance that had grown between us felt less insurmountable. But just as I thought we were making progress, Clara's voice rose, frustration spilling over. "You don't understand how your words hurt me. It felt like you wanted to push me away completely." Tears glistened in her eyes, and my heart ached at the sight of her pain. In that moment, a surge of determination washed over me. "I know I messed up and I'm truly sorry. I never meant to push you away. Can we work on this together?" I reached out tentatively, my hand hovering in the air, a silent plea for reconnection. Clara hesitated, caught between her need to protect herself and the glimmer of hope for healing. Finally, she sighed, the tension in her shoulders easing. "Okay, let's try. But you need to understand that it's going to take time," she said, her voice softer now, a hint of vulnerability breaking through. I felt a flicker of hope ignite within me. This was it, the first step toward rebuilding our fractured relationship, and I was ready to embrace the journey ahead, no matter how challenging it might be. As we continued to discuss our emotions, I felt the heavy weight of resentment begin to lift. We shared our fears and hopes, and with every word I sensed the possibility of healing blossom between us. By the time we wrapped up, I felt a mix of exhaustion and relief. We hadn't solved everything, but we had opened a door to understanding, a glimmer of light peeking through the cracks of our broken bond. Looking at Clara, I saw a flicker of warmth in her gaze, a sign that perhaps we could find our way back to each other after all. The road ahead would not be easy, but at least we were walking it together, and that realization filled me with a renewed sense of hope and determination. The tension in the air was palpable, charging the atmosphere like an approaching storm. I stood in the kitchen, my fingers gripping the countertop as I stared into the swirling depths of my coffee. The familiar aroma was bitter, a stark contrast to the sweetness I longed for in my relationship with Clara. I could hear the muffled conversations from the living room, punctuated by laughter that felt distant and hollow. Each sound sent a jolt of anger through me, and I wrestled with the urge to confront my mother over everything that had transpired. As I paced back and forth, my mind was a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions. Memories flooded back, reminding me of our once thriving bond, now frayed by my reckless words. I could almost hear Clara's laughter, vibrant and full of life, but now it only echoed the void between us. The image of her teary eyes haunted me, a constant reminder of the hurt I had caused. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had not only betrayed her trust, but had also threatened the very fabric of our family. "What am I going to do?" I whispered to myself, my heart racing with the weight of my decisions. I felt like a puppet in my own life, manipulated by my emotions. I needed to regain control, to reclaim my narrative and prevent further damage. Perhaps it was time to take a more assertive approach, to plan a way to mend what I had broken, or maybe even seek retribution for the chaos I felt trapped in. In that moment of clarity, I realized I couldn't just apologize and expect everything to return to normal. I had to show Clara that I was willing to fight for our relationship, to prove that I understood the depth of my mistakes. I grabbed a notepad and began jotting down my thoughts. I needed a strategy, specific steps to take, tangible actions to demonstrate my commitment to rebuilding our connection. With each word I wrote, I felt a sense of empowerment blossoming within me. I would approach Clara with honesty, but I also needed to prepare for the possibility of pushback. I envisioned our conversations, how I would express my regrets and the steps I was willing to take to change. I couldn't let fear dictate my actions any longer. I had to be brave enough to face the consequences of my impulsiveness and perhaps even start the journey toward redemption together. As I concluded my notes, a flicker of hope ignited in my chest. I was ready to confront the mess I had made and fight for the relationship I cherished. This was the first step on a long road, but I was determined to navigate it, guided by a newfound sense of purpose and clarity. The room was charged with an unsettling energy, the shadows from the flickering overhead lights casting hesitant shapes on the walls. I paced back and forth, the hardwood floor creaking beneath my feet, the sound echoing like a heartbeat in the silence that enveloped me. The faint scent of burnt coffee lingered in the air, a reminder of my frenzied attempts to prepare for the confrontation that loomed ahead. Each breath felt heavier than the last as I rehearsed the words I needed to say, but doubt clawed at my resolve. Would this be the moment I finally broke through to Clara, or would it push her further away? I glanced at the family photos lining the walls, each image a snapshot of our once happy moments, now tainted by the rift that had developed between us. As I stood there, I could feel the weight of my impulsive actions from the dinner pressing down on me. Memories of Clara's hurt expression when I had dismissed her feelings came flooding back, and guilt washed over me like a cold wave. How had we let things spiral so far? I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what lay ahead. When Clara finally entered the room, the air shifted, thick with unspoken words. She looked weary, her eyes shadowed with concern and fatigue. I felt my heart race as I struggled to find the right words, my palms clammy against the fabric of my jeans. "Mom, we need to talk," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, trembling with the weight of what I was about to say. Clara's gaze met mine, a flicker of apprehension crossing her features, and I could see the walls she had built around herself starting to rise again. "About what, Zoe?" she asked, her tone cautious, revealing the hurt lingering beneath her calm exterior. The tension crackled between us like static electricity, and I could feel my throat tightening as I prepared to pull back the curtain on our fractured relationship. I took a step closer, my heart pounding, and began to lay bare my feelings, hoping to reach her through the haze of our misunderstandings. "I've been thinking about everything that happened at dinner, and I realize how thoughtless I was. I didn't mean to hurt you, but I felt so lost and overwhelmed that I lashed out without thinking," I confessed, my words spilling out in a rush. Clara's eyes softened momentarily, and I saw a flicker of the mother I had known, the one who had always been my anchor. But just as quickly, her defenses went back up, and I could see the hurt reflected in her gaze. "You don't understand, Zoe. It felt like you were pushing me away on purpose, like you didn't want me there at all," she replied, her voice trembling with emotion. The pain in her eyes pierced through me like a dagger, and I felt my resolve harden. This was my chance to not only apologize but to rebuild the trust that had eroded between us. I took a deep breath, my chest tightening with the weight of my own vulnerability. "I know I messed up. I was selfish and scared, and I pushed you away when all I really wanted was to feel connected to you again. I love you, Mom, and I don't want to lose you. Can we start over?" I pleaded, my voice breaking as the words tumbled out, each one laced with desperation. I could see the flicker of hope in her eyes mingling with uncertainty. Clara hesitated, her expression shifting as she weighed my words. "Starting over means facing the truth, Zoe. It means acknowledging the hurt and working through it together," she said, her voice steady but soft, as if she were testing the waters before diving in. My heart raced at her response, and I nodded, feeling a surge of determination rise within me. "I'm ready for that. I'll do whatever it takes to prove it to you. I want us to be able to talk openly and honestly about everything, no matter how hard it is. I want to be better," I promised, my throat tight with emotion. Clara's gaze softened, and in that moment I understood that this conversation was just the beginning of a long and arduous journey. But I was prepared to take the first step, however daunting it felt, because I knew our relationship was worth fighting for. As we stood there, the air between us began to shift, the weight of our past grievances slowly lifting as we opened up about our feelings. The flickering light above us cast a warm glow, illuminating the path toward healing, one hesitant step at a time. I felt the knot in my chest start to loosen as Clara reached out, her hand brushing against mine, a silent acknowledgement that we were both willing to try. In that moment, surrounded by the shadows of our past, I felt a spark of hope igniting within me. Perhaps we could mend what had been broken, and together we could begin to write a new chapter in our story, one filled with understanding and love, even in the face of adversity. The atmosphere in the room shifted, a fragile truce hanging in the air as Clara and I sat across from each other. The once vibrant colors of the decorations felt muted, overshadowed by the gravity of our conversation. I could hear the faint ticking of the clock, each second echoing the urgency of the moment. My heart raced as I took a deep breath, feeling the warmth of her hand still clasped in mine, a lifeline amidst the chaos of our emotions. "I never wanted to hurt you, Clara," I began, my voice trembling slightly. The words felt like an anchor, grounding me in the reality of our situation. I was scared, overwhelmed by everything happening around us. I lashed out because I didn't know how to express my fear of losing you. I thought pushing you away would protect me, but it only drove us further apart. I could see the flicker of understanding in her eyes, a glimmer of hope that perhaps she could see my vulnerability. Clara's expression softened, her shoulders relaxing as she processed my words. I felt the same way, Melissa. It was like we were both standing on opposite sides of a chasm, too proud to bridge the gap. "I didn't know how to reach you either," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. The sincerity in her tone stirred something deep within me, a longing to reconnect and rebuild what had been lost. In that moment, the weight of our past grievances felt lighter, as if we were shedding the burdens we had carried for too long. I squeezed her hand tighter, an unspoken promise that I was committed to mending our relationship. "Let's not let fear dictate our actions anymore, Clara. I want us to communicate, to share our feelings openly, without the walls we've built. We can't afford to lose each other again." Tears welled in her eyes, and I felt my own heart ache at the sight. "I'm willing to try, Melissa. I want to understand you better, to heal together. But it's going to take time," she replied, her voice trembling with emotion. I nodded, fully aware that the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but the desire to rebuild our bond filled me with determination. As we sat there, hand in hand, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. The journey of healing had begun, not just for Clara and me, but for our entire family. I knew there would be challenges ahead, but for the first time in a long while, I felt hopeful about our future together. The flickering candlelight illuminated our faces, casting a warm glow that mirrored the rekindled connection between us. We were ready to face whatever came next together, and that thought filled my heart with courage and love. The days following our heartfelt conversation felt like a gentle unfolding of a new chapter. The air in our home was lighter, infused with the scent of fresh flowers and the comforting aroma of meals shared together. I could see Clara moving with a newfound ease, her laughter echoing through the hallways, a sound I had longed to hear. Each smile exchanged was a small victory, a step toward healing the rift that had once felt insurmountable. Memories of our laughter mingled with the bittersweet reminders of the past, but they no longer loomed over us like a dark cloud. As I sat with Clara in the living room, I felt a warmth envelop us, a safe cocoon where we could explore our vulnerabilities without fear. We reminisced about simpler times, sharing stories that had woven the fabric of our relationship. I could see the flicker of understanding in her eyes, a silent agreement that we were both committed to nurturing this bond. The walls that had once felt like barriers began to dissolve, replaced by a bridge of trust and compassion. One evening, while sipping tea together, Clara shared her own struggles, her words tumbling out like a release of pent-up emotions. I listened intently, feeling the weight of her experiences resonate within me. It was in those moments that I realized the power of vulnerability. Our willingness to share our fears and hopes had forged an unbreakable connection. I understood that healing was not just about mending wounds, but also about embracing the beauty of our imperfections. As time passed, I felt a renewed sense of purpose, eager to cultivate our relationship. I promised myself to be more open, to express my feelings without the fear of hurting her. The journey ahead would not be without challenges, but I was ready to face them alongside